to Myth Monsters. My name is Erin and I'll be your host for these little snack bite-sized podcasts on folklore and mythical monsters from around the world. I'll also be dropping in some references that they have to recent culture, and where you can see these represented in modern day content so that you can learn more and get as obsessed as I am about these absolute legends of the mythological world. I had the best opportunity to go on BBC Radio 2 last week, and I had such a blast talking about our beloved Nessie. If you missed it, I posted a clip and a link on my social media, and if you're new and you've come here from the show, welcome to our little monster hideaway, and you're joining us for a super cool episode this week. For this week's monster, we're heading into the wild forests of the beautiful Brazil for a mischievous little nature spirit, the Curupira. The Curupira are typically described as a short, dark or green-skinned man with wild, fiery orange or red hair. They sometimes have red eyes, and they wear leafy or bark-covered clothing to fit into their surroundings. They are also sometimes depicted as having sharp teeth and pointed ears, but they are nonetheless humanoid in nature. The most recognisable feature of the Curupira, however, is their feet, which are backwards, as are their knees, meaning their whole lower leg is facing the opposite way. They famously do not wear shoes to allow their feet to scare visitors, but also to leave deceptive footprints for travellers looking to find their way out, but the footprints lead them deep into the forest in order to kill or eat them, and they liked hearts in particular. In some regions, there are different beliefs on their appearance, such as having no hair, having super hairy bodies, having one eye, and, strangely, no anus, hence the stocky build, because you're kind of all built up. But these are all up for argument as well. You can often find Curupira on the back of a very large hog, peccary, deer or rabbit in some stories, as they befriend all animals in the forest, but use the hogs most commonly to defend against intruders with ferocity if needed. The Curupira are considered nature spirits, but also wild men or guardians of the forest. There's no report that they were ever physically intangible or that they act like spirits in any way. They are very much humanoid boys. The Curupira's main mission in life is to be a nuisance for those in their forests who intend to do it harm, mostly from the risk of overcutting or overpoaching. They punish humans who harvest too much by making them lose their way in the thick Amazonian forest, meaning that they will often die of exposure, falling, drowning, or being eaten by a large animal. They do this mostly with their feet, making the person get lost by following the Curupira when they're trying to find their way out by following the backwards footsteps. That, of course, leads them in circles. They also had a few powers. They had the connection to all wildlife in the forest, and can ask for assistance from the animals at any point. However, they also have the power to stun people with a massively loud whistle, which leaves them dizzy, headachy, and sluggish. This was meant to mimic a famous Brazilian bird, the tinamou bird, which looks very similar to a guinea fowl, if that helps visualise them, I suppose. However, they could also mimic human voices to lure people into their traps. As well as having enchanting voices to some, they would often sing a song with the lyrics, "I'm walking along my path, behind me come walking, walking." They are also incredibly strong, enough to be able to carry a grown man, but you'd most likely pass out if you were around them, and especially that close, because they smell so revoltingly bad. They could also make you have really intense bad thoughts and nightmares, and could make you believe that your travelling party was against you, or that you were being deceived. You do all of this while finding it particularly hilarious, by the way. They are known for being tricksters rather than being deadly, but I understand if you feel this is a little bit more on the deadly side. They definitely teeter between the two. You could appease them, however. The Curupira are really fond of tobacco, sugarcane, cassava and liquor, and it's said that any hunters or loggers that wish to be undisturbed by the Curupira bring these with them as a gift. But the Curupira, although humans have only seen male ones, have to hide these gifts from their wives because they're bad habits, which is why these gifts are such a treat. The Curupira were family monsters and would often have wives and children. They would all live together in a dead tree hollow. Whilst the male went out to trick travellers and protect the forest, the females would stay and look after the home and the kids. However, there were more malicious stories of female Curupira, that they would join their family in tricking travellers, or they would trespass on fields to steal cassava from humans. It was said that the females could either be semi-attractive with long, luscious hair, or they could be the utter opposite, the most hideous, ugly beings you could see. Their youngest children are considered to be another mythical beast, the Saki. The Saki I will cover in another episode, but here's a quick summary. They are one-legged, dark-skinned tricksters who appear and reappear within dust devils. Again, very much their MO is to trick humans, so you can see where they get it from. The real question, can you kill a Curupira? Kind of. We believe that potentially we can kill them with human means, as in weaponry and all those kind of things, but they can die from natural causes as well, which is great, I guess, but they were also known for reviving themselves, so maybe don't rely on killing them. However, if you're just trying to get away from them, you can appease them with all those gifts I talked about earlier, or you can fend them off. You can also make a cross or wheel out of liana vine or palm leaf from the forest and throw this at them, which forces them to completely abandon what they were doing, grab it and unravel it to give you a chance to get away. That is the best method, I think. Now, let's move on to etymology. The word Curupira is from the Tupi-Guarani language, which not only comes from Brazil, but also Guyana and Paraguay, and means covered in wounds and blisters, or rough and pimply skin. Interestingly, nothing to do with their backwards feet, which I would consider their defining feature, and mostly about them having rough or pimply skin, which is not massively defined in their description, which I think is quite odd. I will note, as well as Brazil, Guyana and Paraguay, this mythical monster is also present in Venezuela and Peru as well, so it's found throughout a lot of countries within South America, just as a note going forward, but it is very famously a Brazilian monster, so I'm not leading you the wrong way, I promise. This is also a monster from the Amazon, meaning because of tribal culture, we're not going to have an exact date of when this monster first came into being, which is very common for a lot of our episodes. However, the first mention of the Curupira was in 1560, when a missionary, Jose de Anquita, wrote about his experience with one, and I've actually got the extract here. It's a well-known thing, and it's rumoured by everyone that there are certain demons, which the Brazilians call Curupira, that often attack Indians in the bush, wound them with the whip, tormenting and killing them. Our brothers are witnesses of this, having seen the dead killed by them. Therefore the Indians, in order to appease the demons, traverse the path through the Sierto hinterlands, full of rough woodland and steep hills, to reach the highest mountain, leaving bird feathers, fans, arrows and such things as a kind of oblation, begging the demons to do them no harm. This trip was followed by a couple more missionaries and traders within the 15 and 1600s, including one in 1640 by the director of the Dutch West India Company, which, if you don't know, was one of the biggest trading companies in history. In 1641, it was claimed that the Matuyu tribe of Brazil had backward-facing feet like this monster, but they were just realistically a normal local tribe. The same tribe, though, was very famous for wearing shoes when they could find them to redirect enemies away from their path, which might have created the myth of this monster altogether, but we're not massively sure on this. There have been arguments amongst scholars that the Curupira was treated as either a member of a pantheon of gods for tribespeople back in the day, or even as a devil figure for them. However, this was debunked in later studies because of just a cultural change through the centuries. And whilst the Curupira could have once been considered a Pan-like deity, they're more of that mischievous trickster spirit that definitely does rule the roost of their forests now. I do have two fun stories about the Curupira, one in which a Curupira kills a native hunter and brings back the heart to the man's wife and child to eat. The wife finds out and, devastated of course, manages to escape into the night with the child, leaving the Curupira at home. With the help of a tree frog and some immensely sticky saliva, the mother and child climb a tree, and when the Curupira attempts to follow them, he gets stuck in that sticky sap and eventually dies. Doesn't say how, but we assume exposure, or maybe it was like acidic or something. The other story is that of a hunter who is trapped by a Curupira and asked to give over his heart, but the hunter gives him a monkey heart instead and persuades the Curupira to give over his own, which he does, and immediately dies, obviously. The hunter then goes to retrieve the teeth of the Curupira and finds it has been revived, and he gives him a magic bow, but swears him to secrecy of where he got it from. Now, in one version of the story, his wife manages to get it out of him where he got this bow from, and he dies. That's it, the hunter's dead. And in another version, he uses it to hunt birds, which breaks the unspoken taboo of not using it to kill animals because, guardian of the forest, and again, the hunter dies. However, the Curupira comes back and mends the hunter with wax to replace his flesh. Now alive, he warns the hunter not to eat hot food, because, again, Of course, the hunter ignores this once again and melts away during dinner one night. All fun. Now, of course, these types of monsters are created within folklore to scare people away from doing the thing that the monster is protecting. And protecting the forest is a very common theme throughout Amazonian folklore. However, it's also really common in other mythologies, such as the Leshy in Russian folklore, the king of the forest who eats you alive if you damage it. Or there's the Capra from Filipino mythology, who guards the mango trees, smoking their massive cigars to ward off hunters and loggers. Both of these monsters have their own episodes if you do want to learn more about them separately, by the way. There are two others from this part of the world, the Pokai from Guyana, who are long-haired urchins who have backwards turned feet and use the heel of it to hit the drums. The Chulachaki from Peru, who have one leg shorter than the other and 1 foot larger than the other to trick victims into their caves and eat them. Very similar to the Curupira, both of them, but from the same part of the world, just different countries. In reality, you can still see the Curupira celebrated in São Paulo, as in 1970 it was decreed that the Curupira is their state symbol as a guardian of the forest and all animals. They have a huge statue of the Curupira in the state capital, and during a whole week in August, the government signs no official documents, as the Curupira is the only protector during that folklore week to celebrate the power in this ancient spirit. How cool is that? Now, from reality, let's move into modern media. There's not a lot for this one, no massive surprises there, so I've peppered in a few of the bits for the Curupira that I could find, but there's also a bunch of Brazilian mythology bits and some nature spirit bits in here too. So, for art, I really struggled to find any portrait or historical art for this week's fixture. However, have a look at all of the amazing independent art for this one, because it's all fantastic and it's brilliant to see how wide the variations are for this monster too. In movies, we have The Red Scroll, Avatar, Hellboy 2, The Golden Army, Wendy, Epic, My Neighbor Totoro, Princess Mononoke, The Ugly Duckling, Harry Potter, Godzilla, King of the Monsters, Frozen 2, King Arthur, Legend of the Sword, The Hollow Child, Fantasia 2000, The Secret of Kells, Fern Gully, The Last Rainforest, and Mavka, The Forest Song. For TV, we have One Piece, Beastmaster, Alem Dalenda, Castello Ratimbum, Elena of Avalor, Invisible City, Catalendax, Kurokevi, Charmed, Once Upon a Time, Power Rangers, Avatar, The Last Airbender, Hilda, Barbie Presents Thumbelina, and Harvey Beats. In video games, we have ones such as Wildflowers, Street Fighter, Aritana and the Harpy's Feather, Devil Children, The Last Nightmare, Alendo do Quebeca de Kia, Legend Quest, Baldur's Gate, Guild Wars, The Legend of Zelda, Elder Scrolls, Dragon Age, The Witcher, Thief, World of Mana, Tuhu Project, Story of Seasons, Quest for Glory, Total War Warhammer, World of Warcraft, Pokemon, League of Legends, Neverwinter Nights, Warcraft, Terraria, Samurai Showdown, Temtem, Harvest Moon, Kid Icarus, Lusternia, Dragon Quest, Gigantic, Azura's Wrath, and Final Fantasy. My book recommendation this week is for Brazilian Folktales by Olivia Maria M. de Almeida, or Legends of Brazil, Spirits, Monsters and Guardians, the Introduction to Brazilian Folklore by M. Kramer, for some really authentic Brazilian folklore stories. And for our younger listeners, have a look at the Big Book of Brazilian Folklore Stories and Legends by Luana Jales for some amazing kid-friendly stories about this part of the world's mythology. Now it's time for Do I Think They Existed? No, I don't know. I do believe, though, that they were a really important folklore figure, based on the idea that they were a deterrent to damage the forest in any way, out of just pure risk of being hunted by them. Do I think a ginger man with backwards feet riding a wild boar is going to come and get me if I litter in the forest? No, but I would really hesitate if I was told that it would. Yeah, probably. Although I'd like to stress that I would not litter in the rainforest anyway, just as a clear point here. I think, to be honest though, the threat of anacondas, tarantulas and wild boar on their own might persuade me to stay away. But poachers and hunters maybe need a little bit more than usual animals as a threat, so long may this one dissuade those nasty types. However, I'm not massively for hearts being eaten, or being convinced to give one away, so I might just keep clear of this one myself. I actually first heard of this monster through a game called Wildflowers, which I really recommend to any of my farming game types out there. There's a Curupira called Ariel who helps you with the animals on your farm, and he's super mischievous and fun. You get to make him a whole load of Brazilian and cultural foods. It's made by a really great, fab Australian indie studio, so go play it. It's on Switch and console and PC and everything. But what do you think? Did the Curupira roam the Brazilian rainforests looking for humans to prank or get revenge on? Let me know on social media. I would love to know what you think about this one. I have wanted to cover this monster for a while. It was originally back in my lineup for 2024 before I had to call hiatus, so I'm glad that we finally got it on the roster. I wish I could walk backwards whilst looking at the person I was previously speaking to without looking stupid, so I think this monster is pretty neat. Next week, we are heading over to the outback for an Australian cryptid, and at the point of writing, I'm not entirely too sure whether there'll be enough information for a full episode, but I guess we'll find out. Hello, this is Erin from the future. I've written that episode now, and there is enough information, so just to confirm, we're going ahead. Anyway, I'll let other Erin get back to you. So, come hunting with me through New South Wales next week for the Blue Mountains Panther. Very exciting. For now, thank you so much for listening. It's been an absolute pleasure. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give it a rating on the service you are listening on. I've got loads of social media for any questions or suggestions on what monsters to cover next, and I'd really love to hear from you. The social media handles for TikTok, YouTube and Instagram are Myth Monsters Podcast, and the Twitter is Myth Monsters Pod. But I'm also now on Blue Sky under Myth Monsters as well, and all of our content can be found at mythmonsters.co.uk, and you can find us on Good Pods, Buy Me a Coffee and Patreon if you want to help me fund the podcast too. Come join the fun though, share this with your pals. They might love me as much as you do. But for now, stay spooky. And I'll see you later, babes.